The district's annual overnight arts festival, Mayor Muriel Bowser Presents Art All Night, is back this year to kick off the fall festival season. Art All Night is a 2-night event that celebrates the district's performing, visual, and for the first time, culinary arts with the addition of Dine All Night. The free festival will be held across all 8 wards on September 29th and 30th from 7 p.m. to 3 a.m. More than 100 local artists and over 50 local restaurants and 20 main streets and business improvement districts are participating. Visit dcartallnight.org to map out your experience for the festival and for more information. Today on CityCast DC, things are getting tense in Cleveland Park over a plan to install bike lanes on Connecticut Avenue. Last week, protesters argued that removing valuable parking spots to make way for bike lanes would kill businesses along the strip. The city is still reviewing the design plans for the bike lanes, but back in April, we hosted a debate between 2 neighbors over whether or not they should even happen. Today's Wednesday, September 20th. I'm Bridget Todd, and here's what DC is talking about. All right, so let's start with the basics. Connecticut Avenue bike lane plan is still in the works, but overall the city is expected to reduce the road to 4 lanes of traffic from 6 lanes of traffic and replace parking with a one-way protected bike lane. Lee, you're the president of the organization Save Connecticut Avenue, which is campaigning against this plan. Swale, you're an A&C commissioner in the Cleveland Park area and a very vocal proponent of the bike lanes. Let's start with you, Swale. Why do some constituents want bike lanes specifically? And why not just try to expand Connecticut Avenue or increase bus service?
Sure. Thank you, Bridget. Thank you for that question. So the first thing is, this plan is more about just the bike lanes. This plan is about safety, redesign, and better livability in general for our community. And, as someone, I'm a professor of environmental science at American University for my day job. I genuinely believe that one of the ways we make our community safer is by safer infrastructure. This isn't the responsibility of drivers, pedestrians, cyclists. It's really the way we've built and designed our infrastructure that needs to improve. And that's what this plan does. It does it for everyone, beyond just people who ride bicycles. The second thing I want to clarify about this plan, when you asked about the community, this was a very grassroots effort. In 2017, the community requested a study be done on Connecticut Avenue, including considering protected bike lanes. All the ANCs up and down Connecticut Avenue, again, passed resolutions in support of the study. This past election, our ANC, just as an example, had 8 open seats. 7 seats were won by candidates who supported this redesign, and only 1 candidate did not. So this is a community-driven effort, and the community continues to support it, as this effort moves forward. And then finally, the last thing I would like to say is that there's 2 shocks that we're dealing with, one very short-term shock and one long-term shock that have changed the way we think about our infrastructure. Climate change means that we have to shift away from single-car transit that has been dominating our culture and our cities for a long time. And so if we need to tackle climate change and tackle the emissions that are taking place in our community, we need to also rethink about the design that we have currently in place. The other short-term shock is COVID-19. During the pandemic, post-pandemic, one of the things everyone realized was they would like outdoor space and outdoor activities close to where they live, work, and play. Those became very prominent during the pandemic, and they've continued as the pandemic has gone on. As you saw, Beach Drive was recently closed to car traffic to promote more pedestrians, bicyclists, and other people to live outside their cars. And Connecticut Avenue is another way towards doing that. And also focusing on most of the way that we get around. 80% of the way that people come to the business district is by walk, biking, or transit. The other 20% is by cars, which includes rideshare, the percentage of which is going up. So to redesign Connecticut Avenue, not just in terms of safety, also in terms of how the community want it, but also responding to how we're going to react to climate change, as well as changes during the COVID-19 pandemic, is essential. And that's really what this plan is about.
So I'm hearing you say that this is really about safety, environmental factors, and that the majority of DC leaders are supportive of this. Lee, why do you think the bike lanes will negatively impact people living here and working in the area?
The first thing is that Swala and I agree on public safety. Our organization is focused on pedestrian safety and cyclist safety. We want to see more crosswalks We want to see traffic lights at every crosswalk. We want to slow traffic down, but we don't want it to create gridlock. And we believe adding bike lanes to Connecticut Avenue will cause gridlock. We talk about public safety. This bike lane plan will divert approximately 7,000 cars off of Connecticut Avenue onto neighborhood streets. That will make our neighborhood streets even more dangerous. The reason I got involved in this project is that I'm a cyclist and an e-cyclist. And when I heard about the plan, when the mayor announced it at the Chevy Chase Community Center, I was pretty excited. I was thinking, oh, great, bike lanes on Connecticut Avenue. But details matter. When I looked at the plan, I saw that they were eliminating 79% of the parking spaces, over 42% of the loading zones, and the loading zones that are left are few and far between and not near a lot of the businesses. So businesses rely on curbside pickup and delivery, as Swala had mentioned. Well, that's going to be a problem when bike lanes are along the curbs. I'm also concerned with the public safety as it relates to emergency responders. DDOT has said publicly that there'll be 4 to 5 intersections where the congestion will be so bad, and they don't have a solution to it. Every second counts when emergency responders have to get to a destination. And so lives will be lost, and property damage could be much worse if a fire engine can't get to a fire in a reasonable amount of time. We're also worried about the ADA regulations. Disabled and the mobility challenged will also have difficulties crossing the street, accessing businesses. Bus passengers will have to cross bike lanes. Details matter.
Well, let me ask you this, Swale. You both seem to agree that this is about public safety. How do you feel about the concerns that Lee's just laid out, that public safety could actually be jeopardized if emergency responders aren't able to get in, at a reasonable speed? Are there mitigating factors for how this plan will affect delivery drivers and emergency services and some of the other factors that Lee's mentioned?
Sure. I think one of the great things that Lee has mentioned is about safety. I'm glad that he agrees, that we need safety in this community. If there hadn't been extensive study and extensive engagement on this project, both in terms of data collection and thoughtfully thinking about where some of this stuff will go, then yes, I would have the same concerns as Lee. But there has been quite a bit of study and quite a bit of engagement. And I'll give you certain examples, right? For example, when DDOT studied how traffic will be diverted, this was pre-pandemic data when we had rush hour traffic. DDOT studied how traffic will be diverted up to 2045. The diversion that we talked about was, that they'll be diverted into neighborhood streets. That's not actually what happened. 55% will actually be other roads that are not Connecticut Avenue or our neighborhoods. Over half the traffic will go down other sort of arterial roads that are better designed for traffic than the community we live in. The studies that were again done with pre-pandemic data showed that gridlock would be at the most an extra 4 minutes of driving down Connecticut Avenue if you start from the very north and go to the very south. And one of the things that the pandemic allowed us to do was allowed us to have this natural experiment. For most of the time on Connecticut Avenue is a 4-lane road. And if you look at during the pandemic, they actually turned Connecticut Avenue into a 4-lane road with parking on both sides. The diversions of traffic and the worry about gridlock, that didn't happen. And more, the other thing that DDOT did was also collect data on how traffic looks like right now. The pandemic traffic might have returned, but the pandemic rush hour peak when Connecticut Avenue was 6 lanes, that hasn't returned at all. The traffic is more or less flat throughout the day. And so what we're seeing today is we're seeing that our roadway doesn't need to be designed for that 6-hour traffic anymore. And even under the worst case scenarios, we were expecting, the majority of time we were expecting was about 4 minutes. We also talked about, for example, curbside loading, especially for people with disabilities and seniors and also businesses. One of the most important things to note right now is that there exists no dedicated space for people with disabilities to get on and off Connecticut Avenue right now. Most of the parking is 2-hour long-term parking that gets taken up throughout the day but it also disappears during rush hour. That parking doesn't exist during rush hour. So in fact, one of the things that this plan does is that on one side of Connecticut Avenue, we get dedicated places where people with disabilities can get picked up and dropped off. And then we also get the ability to redesign our road and parkings to match what we really need here. And the final thing I'll say is about buses. Right now, buses have to pull in to the closest curbside lane, and they're often jackknifed on the road. So one of the things that DDOT realized was that when bus stops are through the road and buses don't have to pull in, the second thing is if buses have far side stops rather than near side stops that they have right now, that actually improves bus flow, and it also makes it safer for passengers and everyone on the road, including drivers, cyclists, and pedestrians, to get in and out of buses. And so a lot of these things, yes, you're absolutely right to ask those questions, but we've had a 5-year planning process where those things have been worked out. And the great thing is they're still being worked out. And so I think one of the most important things to realize about this is that these issues are being addressed, they are being talked about, and they absolutely do need to be mitigated.
Coming soon to Cleveland Park in D.C., the Loggia Towns at Uptown Plaza, which is a boutique collection of 4 brand new townhomes, with no 2 of them being alike. Located at Connecticut and Newark, each home features 2 to 3 bedrooms and dedicated outdoor space. Sales start in October. Visit uptownplazadc.com to join the VIP list and be the first to know when pre-sale commences. Again, that's uptownplazadc.com, uptownplazadc.com. Sales and marketing by Urban Pace. Hey, parents! Celebrate the joy of early learning with your little one at DC Public Library's annual Starfest. That's Saturday, September 30th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the MLK Library downtown. STAR stands for Sing, Talk, and Read, which are 3 key early literacy practices that will help your child grow into a confident learner. At this year's Starfest, you'll learn how you can add STAR practices to your daily routine. You'll also enjoy singing and dancing to live music, playing fun games, and more. At Starfest, DC families with young children can also sign up for the Books from Birth program to get a free book delivered to your home each month. Don't miss this year's Starfest on Saturday, September 30th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the MLK Library. Learn more at dclibrary.org/star. That's dclibrary.org/STAR.
Lee, you've mentioned that for you, a lot of this is really grounded in public safety, which is important to you. Are there other ideas or plans that you would prefer to promote public safety along Connecticut Avenue rather than the bike lanes?
Our organization does endorse speed cameras, which will slow traffic. Our contention is that DDOT's primary focus has been to try to figure out how to squeeze 2 curbside bike lanes into an avenue that's too narrow to accommodate them. So a lot of DDOT's data, which was gathered during the pandemic when nobody was paying attention, so the public has really not been involved in this. DDOT really didn't do much outreach to businesses. 30 businesses answered a survey. I don't know how the survey got to those businesses, but our organization went to every business on Connecticut Avenue, and over 120 of them signed our petition opposing the bike lanes. So somehow DDOT feels that they know more than the businesses themselves as far as what's good for them. I can't talk to what the plan might look like as far as pick up and drop off on which side of the street. I can only deal with the plans that I see on DDOT's website, which, by the way, is sadly outdated. But what I would say is that why aren't we checking and looking and see how the elimination of reversible lanes and the lowering of the speed limit, what that impact is on crashes and safety, and then take another look, see if bike lanes are needed. Rock Creek Park and Capitol Crescent Trail are available. I used to commute to my office down at the Watergate. I used to go through Rock Creek Park, and it worked. I didn't see a lot of other cyclists. In fact, the Commuter Connection states that less than 2% of the commuters cycle to work. So this project, which started out being about safety has morphed into an expensive bike lane project.
Swale, what do you have to say to all that?
Sure. I mean, first, I would like to say that 6 lanes of Connecticut Avenue is absolutely enough space to accommodate pedestrians, bicyclists, and drivers. It's a very wide range of traffic, and it takes up a lot of public space that we absolutely do have space for. So I wholly disagree with that, but I also disagree with that there hasn't been engagement with the community. Again, DDOT by themselves have had 50 community meetings. The ANCs have had community meetings on top of that. The business petition that Lee pointed out, way less than half the businesses have signed that petition, with some of the major businesses openly saying that they support the plan. And then as far as crashes after the pandemic, when the reversible lanes were gone and speed limit has been lowered, just last month we had someone die on Connecticut Avenue in front of the zoo. That's one of the largest crosswalks on Connecticut Avenue. Has a traffic light, even though it's not an intersection, something that Lee said he wanted to do. The reversible lanes are gone and the speed limit has been lowered, yet we still had a fatal crash on Connecticut Avenue just last month. So one of the things I think we have to realize is this data is being collected. It's all available on the website. We are seeing this, but we're not seeing the safety improvements that a broad swath of infrastructure change will bring. We really need to slow down drivers. And then I actually like to point one very interesting thing out. Lee pointed out he's a cyclist, right? And he said, I'm a cyclist, but I'm against this plan. I'd like to tell you all that I am not a cyclist, because I am very scared of cycling on the road. And one of the really things I like to point out is that when people say statistics about barely anyone bikes to work, or cyclists like Lee say that they don't want these bike lanes, when we change infrastructure, it's for people for whom that infrastructure doesn't feel safe right now. These bike lanes aren't for Lee, who's confident to cycle right now. These bike lanes are for that middle school student that emailed us and said she wanted to bike to Alice Deal. These bike lanes are for the retired couple that came to our meeting, said they just bought an e-bike and they want to be able to bike around the neighborhood. And so it's really, really important for us, especially for me as an elected official, to think beyond me and have empathy for the people that really want this to happen and really want safety to come to Connecticut Avenue.
Lee, what's your response to what Swale has just laid out?
Yeah, well, number one, there are 110 curb cuts from Calvert Street to Chevy Chase Circle. There are 24 intersections, which is where most of the accidents happen, from Calvert to Legation. I would be scared to death to have my child ride a bike on Connecticut Avenue. You're taking 26,000 vehicles a day and you're throwing bike lanes, and the chances of accidents happening become far greater. Let's talk about the fatality that recently occurred on Connecticut Avenue. Bike lanes would not have stopped that. The car drifted into the opposing lane of traffic. We have no idea why. It's a horrific situation, but bike lanes would not have solved that problem. Again, speed cameras, enforcement, traffic lights at crosswalks, those are the items that'll make a difference. If you go on Safer Connecticut Avenue, which is not our website, they say that the risk of severe injury from accidents involving a vehicle and a pedestrian, by lowering the speed limit from 30 to 25, accidents are nearly halved. They also say about 44% of traffic accidents occurred when the reversible lanes were open. So if you eliminate both of those issues, we should see far fewer accidents. There are other problems with this as well. The small number of cyclists who are going to be riding on Connecticut Avenue are not going to move the needle environmentally. In fact, the congestion of cars stuck in traffic and searching for parking spots will actually add to the air pollution. Again, buses will be slowed. We are in favor of moving bus stops from near side to far side. I think that's a great idea. However, buses will be slowed by this traffic and they'll become even less reliable than they are now, which will force people back into cars. We think public transportation is where the effort should be, and not having raised platforms for people to load on and off and have to dodge bicycles when they get on and off the buses or when they queue up for the buses.
Lee, is there a plan for bike lanes on Connecticut Avenue that you actually would want?
I don't think Connecticut Avenue is the place for them. I'd like to see the bike lanes be put on residential streets, which is where I ride, because, again, you have too many cars. Drivers are not the best, to put it lightly, and cyclists are also no better. I can't tell you the number of times that cyclists go flying by me without announcing, on your left, on your right. So you wouldn't put bike lanes on the Beltway. You shouldn't be putting them on Connecticut Avenue. And as I said, it's going to hurt the businesses if Connecticut Avenue becomes as congested as we believe it will. You're going to discourage federal workers from going into their offices downtown, and you're going to see businesses lose parking.
One thing I want to say, one thing that I think personally really upsets me was Lee said, well, you wouldn't put a bike lane on the Beltway. I don't live on the Beltway. Kids don't live on the Beltway. I live right in front of Connecticut Avenue. I fear for my life when I go outside. And, I'm not in the business to say that I blame drivers or cyclists. When we design our infrastructure, when you design a road that has 6 lanes and you put a small speed limit, 25 miles per hour there, that's not going to stop people from driving fast. They see infrastructure. They're like, I have to go fast. This is designed for me to go fast. And it's not their fault. It's the way our infrastructure has been designed. The other quick things that I want to point out is that when you add bicycle lanes to a street like Connecticut Avenue, we're not just talking about bicycle lanes, we're talking about changing the entire infrastructure and the way people travel. 3,000 bicyclists a day are expected once you add these bike lanes. And we've seen that evidence throughout the world, throughout other cities, throughout even in DC, when the 15th Street cycle track was involved. When the infrastructure is built, people come. And I totally agree with you, Lee. Connecticut Avenue is incredibly dangerous right now for kids to ride bicycles, with the curb cuts, with the traffic, which is exactly why we need to be changing.
Let me respond. One of the big problems that bike lanes would cause is that we're talking about bus lanes now stopping in one of the 2 lanes. So you really only have one through lane of traffic. And a minor fender bender in that 1 lane will stop traffic entirely. Because again, buses will be stopping in one of the other lanes. Service vehicles will have nowhere to park. You've got landscape vehicles. Where are they going to park? I can tell you where they're going to park. It's where they do now. They park illegally in one of the lanes of traffic. So you really will end up with buses having to go around illegally parked vehicles and 1 through lane of traffic in each direction. So I would encourage everybody to go to saveconnecticutave.org, check out our website, and join our fight, sign our petition.
Can I just finish one final thought over here? If safety is our priority, and our priority is listening to the community, and our priority is reacting to the pandemic and climate change, then the redesign of Connecticut Avenue is a very, very basic thing that we need to do. And the community has been thinking about this for 10 years. We've been looking at evidence for this for the last 5 years. We're still looking at evidence for this. And to move forward, this is very, very important that we focus on this avenue.
It is a complicated issue. I appreciate the time. This has been very robust. I feel like I learned a lot. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Before we get to your news, a quick update on where we are with those bike lanes. Since this interview originally aired back in April, the old service lane for pickup and drop-off on Connecticut Avenue has been paved away, and there's talk of converting some of the parking spots in front of the businesses there into 30-minute spots for higher turnover. That's exacerbating the issue for all the anti-bike lane protesters who are worried about parking in the area. At the ANC meeting on Monday, commissioners decided to send DDOT a letter requesting that it try out different types of parking periods on the Strip, including more 2-hour parking spots before eliminating so many of the long-term spots there. The outcome of the parking controversy is likely to affect how residents and businesses in the neighborhood feel about bike lanes. Check out our show notes for more details on all of this. And now, your news. Kaiser Permanente workers in the Washington region are threatening to strike if they don't have a new contract by the end of the month. Workers say they're overextended and underpaid. They also say that leadership creates conditions that lead to excessively long waits for patients. Unions representing 80,000 Kaiser employees across the country have approved similar strike authorizations. Also, Wolf Trap, the outdoor concert venue in Vienna, is being criticized for taking a huge cut of artist merch sales. The artist Sarah Beth Tomberlin, who goes by Tomberlin, refused to sell merch at her show this weekend, saying that the venue's aggressive 41% cut would threaten her livelihood as a small artist. Wolf Trap says it doesn't discuss contract terms publicly. And finally, D.C. Council member Brooke Pinto introduced several proposals to quell the crime surge across the city. They include a combination of pre-existing plans and new ideas like increasing surveillance in high-trafficked areas, higher penalties for people convicted of gun crimes, and allowing police to randomly search suspected violent offenders who are out on bail. That's all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, tell a friend who lives, works, or plays anywhere near Connecticut Avenue. Things are changing. We'll be back tomorrow morning with even more news from around the city. Talk to you then.